Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove. I'm here today with another Omnibus review, and today I'll be taking a look at the newly released X-Men Inferno Prologue Omnibus. Now this is one that's very exciting for me, as an X-Men fan, as an X-Men Omnibus collector. This book, for those who maybe don't know, there was an Inferno Prologue oversized hardcover, with all this exact same content that's in here, but it went out of print, I don't even know, many years ago now. It's been out of print for a long time, very hard to find, so it was great news for myself and many others, I'm sure, when earlier this year it was announced that Marvel would be reprinting this and officially labeling it as an omnibus, which is great. And then finally, here it is, so awesome to have it in the collection at last. It's one I've had pre-ordered for probably 6 months or more. Yeah, so with it being brand new, I wanted to give an overview of it, to show it off, and hopefully that'll be something that's useful to see for anybody interested in this book, thinking about getting it, etc. First thing I just want to showcase is this really awesome cover on the dust jacket. This is the direct market variant, the DM cover, by Arthur Adams. Really nice image. It's one that as soon as it was revealed that this was going to be the DM cover, I had to go for that one myself. Not that the other cover is bad, but I mean everybody on there is just looking great. Arthur Adams, one of my favourite artists. As a general rule for me, if there's an Arthur Adams variant of an omnibus cover, it's probably the one I'm going to end up getting. So, very cool image. Just quickly show that off there. Give you a nice look at it. Very cool. On the spine, this is what that looks like. You can see the X-Men logo, Inferno Prologue, and you get this image at the bottom of the spine there. That's what it looks like on the direct market variant. And the back, you get this cool image there of Cyclops fighting Thor, a few other characters there in the background, and your little blurb at the bottom with your contents, so feel free to pause that and take a look. But basically you're getting a decent chunk of X-Factor issues, Uncanny X-Men issues, and New Mutants issues, all leading up to, as you probably guessed, as the title pretty much tells you, the Inferno event. So this is the book, this is the omnibus that comes directly before the Inferno omnibus, which pretty much goes without saying, I would have thought, but just in case. Yeah, so underneath the dust jacket, we get this cover by Mark Silvestri, and that's the cover of the standard variant for the omnibus. A nice image as well, nothing wrong with that. Just had to go for the DM myself. The spine, again, all the same apart from the image at the bottom. Just a quick comparison. That's the image you would get on the standard variant of the dust jacket compared to the DM variant there. Yeah, just a different image if you wondered what they would look like on the bookshelf. And then on the back you get that same image minus the blurb and the text. So, first thing I'll just quickly say about this book. There's no contents page at the beginning. Now I always like to mention that, whether there is or there isn't one. Really like this image though, really cool. Magic Illyana Rasputin in her dark child form. So yeah, no content, you just jump straight into this page with the creators. There's a page here that's kind of like previously, gives you some breakdown of what's been happening in previous issues of the 3 series up to this point. But then you jump straight in with X-Factor 27. So from this point on, I suppose I'll give a quick spoiler warning, just because I'm not going to talk about too many plot points really with this, just going to let the book kind of speak for itself in this one. But it might show off some things that you don't want to know, and I might mention some details that might spoil some stuff. But to basically summarise what's going on in here, so this directly picks up after the Fall of the Mutants event. Fall of the Mutants, which involved 3 separate events really. It wasn't a true crossover event, but it did involve the X-Men, X-Factor and the New Mutants, but they didn't cross over with each other. They had 3 separate storylines going on, but it was a particularly kind of impactful storyline that affected each of them significantly in a different way. So what you see in here is the fallout of that event, the aftermath of that event, and how it affects each of the 3 subsequent teams. So yeah, as seen in the contents, this is not a book that solely focuses on X-Men. It is really split equally into 3/3, covering X-Men, X-Factor and New Mutants. So yeah, that's really kind of what that is, and this goes exactly in between Fall of the Mutants, which will be finally getting an omnibus next year, and the Inferno Omnibus. So this will sit between those two and fill the gap between them, for those wondering. And it's another great step towards having all of Chris Claremont's X-Men run collected in omnibus format as well, which is another great reason to have it for me, and for anyone else, of course, collecting that run. But it's just an interesting time, so it's kind of a mixture of Fall of the Mutants Aftermath and then build up to the Inferno event, but it's really just in-between stuff, to be honest. It's not like everything in here is completely building up Inferno, despite the title of the book. It's just, you know, it's just the chunk of stuff that goes on in between those events, really. But Inferno Prologue, I guess, was as good a name as any to give the collection overall. Interesting time for the X-Men then. So following on from Fall of the Mutants, I would say the most affected of the three teams in terms of what happened in each of their series was the X-Men, because they very briefly died. I mean, it was such a brief death, it almost doesn't count as dying, but technically they did die, even if it was only for about 10 seconds. Then they were brought back. But because their apparent deaths were actually broadcast on TV, everybody thought they were dead. And when they came back, they decided not to tell anybody they were in fact alive, including their friends in the other teams. So New Mutants and X-Factor all believe the X-Men are dead during this time. And this is also the beginning of what's known as the Outback era. So when the X-Men moved into a base in the Australian Outback, in fact I think it's in this issue where that happens, it's a base that's initially occupied by the Reavers, I think. And they get into a fight with them. The X-Men manage to catch them unawares, beat them, kick them out, and they take the base as their own. They claim it. And then for the next sort of, don't know, sort of maybe 15 issues or so, that's where they were. That's where they stayed. Nice image of that cover used for the dust jacket. But yeah, it's a very interesting era. It's one that I like. It's maybe one of the probably the most unconventional part of Chris Claremont's entire run, because the team is split up so much. You've got people split between X-Factor and X-Men. The lineup of the X-Men themselves, not really the iconic X-Men lineup that I think most people associate when they think of the X-Men. But still a great team, obviously still great characters involved. You've got Storm, Wolverine, Rogue. The New Mutants as well. Absolutely love that series. So the New Mutants are dealing with the aftermath of their Fall of the Mutants experience, which for them was the death of their teammate and friend Doug Ramsey, who was killed in such a way as when it happened they didn't even know initially that it had happened. They only kind of realised after the fact and discovered that. So obviously that very sad, deeply affects the team. Cool artwork throughout here as well in the New Mutants. But this was during the time where Louise Simonson was writing the series. So Chris Claremont had written it up to, I think, issue 53 or 54. And then for the rest of the New Mutants run, before it became X-Force, it was written by Louise Simonson, or at least almost until the end, written by her. But yeah, I think they were collaborating quite closely overall. Claremont and Simonson, they pretty good friends. They got on well in generally, so I think they made efforts to make sure that they were collaborating quite closely, making sure that the plots made sense, given that all this stuff is going on like in parallel to each other. Yeah, this is a pretty creepy issue. New Mutants issue 64, where, well, basically where the body of Doug is kind of brought back to life. A little bit creepy. And you've got, of course, Illyana Magic, who is such an awesome character, honestly, but the standout member of the New Mutants team, I think, during this whole era. She's just easily the most kind of, I think, layered character, most fascinating character with her backstory, of course, what happened in the Magic miniseries. Everything about her, I just find it really interesting. And this whole sort of descent to the dark side that she's trying to resist, but finding it harder and harder to resist. I love the Dark Child design as well, this kind of silvery armour that she has to, that kind of appears on her when she takes that form. Really cool artwork though here by Brett Blevins, inked by Terry Austin, whose inking can improve anybody's artwork, I tell you. In my opinion, it's one of the all-time best inkers. And so, yeah, you're finding that, you know, she's firmly kind of getting into that Dark Child identity, and Illyana's plot, her story arc, really culminates in the Inferno event, which of course this is building up to for her. She has a conclusion to her story in there. Just flicking back through a few of those pages, because I think that art looks really good. This is a nice pin-up, Storm. Brett Blevins again. Very cool. And in here you got Rick Leonardi artwork. Which issue is this? Uncanny 231. Yeah, so at this point they're in the Outback. A weird side effect of Fall of the Mutants, of that resurrection that the X-Men had, is that they can no longer be seen on camera. So if you point a camera at them, they appear to be invisible. So people can see them, you know, just with the naked eye. They can be seen on any kind of camera or recording device. They cannot be seen, which is a strange side effect of that whole thing, but it comes into play a few times during these the issues in this era. You've got the reappearance of the Brood here, the incredibly creepy but awesome Brood, alien species, kind of heavily inspired by the alien xenomorphs. But yeah, just great horror creatures, honestly. You know, that original Brood saga that's collected in Uncanny X-Men Volume 3, one of my favourite X-Men stories, I think, just because I was so taken aback the first time I read it by how much of a just strong horror vibe it has going on. So always cool when the Brood show up, this being no exception. You got Madeline Pryor here. She is dealing with the rejection, with the abandonment from her husband, Scott Summers, Cyclops, who had, yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, you know, something Chris Claremont had been strongly opposed to, but when the decision was made to launch X Factor and have it made up of the original X-Men team, bringing Jean Grey back to life, retconning her death in the Dark Phoenix saga, and having Scott Summers run off and leave his wife and newborn baby son to go and be with X Factor and Jean Grey again. Yeah, didn't put Scott Summers in the particularly best light, and it left them having to deal with what happens to Madeline Pryor. And what happens in here, we start to see her own downfall. You know, you got Illyana kind of becoming Dark Child. You got Madeline Pryor slowly being manipulated into becoming the Goblin Queen, who of course she becomes ends up being front and center during Inferno itself. But you start to see that really kind of being foreshadowed in these issues in here, in the Uncanny X-Men issues, because Madeline Pryor is with the X-Men in the Outback. She was with them in Fall of the Mutants, so she is one of the people who everybody thinks is dead. So she's in the Outback with them. And yeah, it's just... Oh yeah. No, just this whole thing with Danny becoming Valkyrie and having this winged horse, I just always thought it was so cool. Really great. And good artwork again. A lot of good artwork during this era in general for me. You know, I like this whole era of Marvel Comics. I think there's a lot of great stories, a lot of great artwork. and obviously a lot of it centered around the X-Men and the X-Teams. And this issue, featuring Arthur Adams artwork. I've already praised him, but it's annual 12. Never did a huge amount of interior pencil work, Arthur Adams, but when you do come across some, it's always great to see. Cool stuff, all very good stuff. Yeah, just a book. I'm just to say it again, I'm just really happy to have it in the collection, filling in another gap in that X-Men Omnibus chronology. Then issue 235, the beginning of the first appearance of the island nation of Genosha, which of course gone on to be quite important through various periods of X-Men history from this point onwards. But yeah, this is the first time that it's ever shown off and that we learn anything about it. And during this time, its original time, it is run by a regime who are particularly anti-mutant, to say the least. Mutants are enslaved, basically have their consciousness taken away from them and forced to be slave labor, basically. If anybody is discovered to have the mutant gene, they are taken off, experimented on, and they kind of go through this process where they become what's called a mutate. And it's just this, probably the most overt kind of allegory for fascist states that the X-Men has ever done. You know, X-Men's always dealt with themes of prejudice and discrimination, of course. That's one of the central concepts behind the entire series from the very beginning. But this Genosha stuff that you see in this story and in subsequent appearances leading up to the Extinction Agenda event, which happens some time after this, it's just a particularly strong and yeah, just in-your-face example of it, really. It's horrible stuff, you know. It's actually quite, I don't know why, I just actually find it kind of difficult to read. It's a little bit disturbing in a way, just how creepy it is. I suppose it's something that has real-world comparisons with things like Nazi Germany and other horrible regimes like that. But yeah, even just seeing like a completely fictional version of something similar to that, it is disturbing to see the way that mutants are so, you know, I don't know, just terribly treated. But it's also during these issues where, again, we're seeing more and more of Madeline Pryor seen here, moving towards the kind of dark identity, her turn to evil, so to speak. During this time as well, you got Magneto as the headmaster of the Xavier School, because all this is taking place during the very long period of time which Charles Xavier was completely absent from all the series. He had left around issue 200, I think, and didn't come back until about issue 275, something like that, when they found him again in space. So he was gone for a long time. And during pretty much all of that time, he had Magneto in charge looking after the New Mutants, although I wouldn't really say he was looking after them, because most of the time they're off doing their own thing. But yeah, I really do like this Brett Blevins work. I can see why people maybe wouldn't like it. Not that I've seen that many instances of people saying they don't like it, but it's one of those kind of cartoony styles in a way. It's almost a little bit like Arthur Adams. But I know not everybody likes it. It's a little bit maybe too exaggerated. But yeah, I think it's great. No issues with me. And that is about it, really. Omnibus, about 800 and something pages. There's a nice pin-up, really cool. Very good. And then extras in the back. Haven't really had a look at this yet. Let's see what's in here. Oh, we got some interviews. Mark Silvestri interview there. A couple of pin-ups. Nice original X-Men pin-up. Yep, covers. Arthur Adams costume designs, like sketches. Yeah, it's not a huge amount of extras, but some cool stuff. And yeah, so that is pretty much that. Hopefully that has been insightful, interesting for anybody wanting to get a look at this book. Yeah, just to reiterate from me again, it's something I'm very happy to finally have in the collection, and definitely look forward to that Fall of the Mutants Omnibus, which is going to be the next big one to add to the Claremont era of X-Men Omnibus. That's still a while off yet. But anyway, thanks as always for watching. If you have any comments to make on the video, feel free to let me know what you think of the book, the run, the content, etc. But yeah, other than that, thanks again for watching, and as always, I'll be back again with another video soon.